8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of the Project Egg Show. I'm your host, Ben Gothard, and today we have the honor of speaking with Gary VanDyke, a gentleman who started and is the founder of a nonprofit called Food for Orphans, an organization that has served over 8 million meals. I'll repeat that, 8 million meals to children in need. And Gary, it is such an honor to be speaking with you today. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
It's my pleasure, Ben. Thank you so much for the invitation.
Absolutely. So let's jump right in. I want to know, what is your story?
I've got a little bit of a long story, but I'll give you the short end of it. Having a varied career in different ventures in different industries, I ended up settling in the radio and television industry as on-air person and as a recording artist. I was a voiceover artist for television and did that for 25 years. Had a great career, had a lot of fun, did a lot of great things. But then when I hit about 53 years old, I went to work for a nonprofit that was taking care of children around the world, kids that were in need. And I was able to go and visit some of these projects. When I visited the project, I was really struck with what I learned, what poverty really is. I thought I had been exposed to poverty before and thought I had not experienced it, but at least I had knowledge of what it was. Then when I actually saw real poverty in a third world country, a developing country, it completely changed my idea of what poverty is. And so when I came home, I began to act differently, think differently, and look at things a little bit differently. Well, during my travels, I was also able to visit orphanages around the world. And that was the situation that struck my heart the hardest. These children who had no parents to go to when they had a nightmare in the middle of the night. And it really hurt me that I was meeting children on these trips that were living on the street, living in the woods, living behind a building in a cardboard box, living on their own. And very rarely did I ever meet a child that had enough food. It was something that just struck me really hard because I realized that when I went home, I was going to go home to a refrigerator and a pantry full of food with a credit card in my pocket and a fast food restaurant on every street corner. And these kids, when they took a bite of food, they didn't know when the next meal was coming. And that is a lot worse than me taking a medical exam and the doctor says, I need you to come back tomorrow for a test, but I want you to fast tonight. Well, then when I fast for a medical test, I know when my next meal is coming. But these kids didn't. They didn't know when their next meal was coming. They didn't know where food was. And I said, if I'm going to go home and I'm going to have food in my refrigerator and I'm going to be taking care of myself and I'm going to have 2 or 3 meals a day, by golly, I'm going to step up and do something for these kids. I'm going to make sure that I'm going to feed at least as many as I can. And I started Food for Orphans because it needed to be done. And when I started it, I was 55 years old. I had never started a nonprofit, had never started a company, had never incorporated before. And I had to learn all this by myself. Didn't have a mentor, didn't have another organization that I could go to and depend on to be an umbrella for me. And so I just did what I had to do. That was 2007. We're a few years beyond that now. And we've, like you said earlier, we've provided 8 million meals, over 8 million meals to orphans around the world in 16 different countries. And I still don't have a college education. I still am just an entrepreneur who said, I'm going to do what I need to do, figure it out, and just do it. And it's worked out fairly well. There's a lot of great kids out there that are being blessed because of donors around the world that want to join me in this fight for the life of these orphans. And that's what it is. It's a fight for their life. And people who said, I'm being blessed, I am going to help these kids. I'm going to step up and I'm going to do something. And Ben, that works very well with me because they can join me anytime and help me feed these kids.
So if that's the short story, what's the long story?
Well, I started my career in restaurant management. And when I started my career in restaurant management, I did that for quite a few years and changed careers to the construction industry. And I was working for other people in the construction industry, company, and was a boss, but I was a superintendent, but I was not an owner. And during that time, I had been married and had 5 children. I'd been married for 20 years. And that was after 20 years, my wife came to me and said, well, I guess it's over. And she left. And that's really impacted me because she also had the children. The court decided that she would be the one that would raise the children. And so literally overnight, I lost my wife and 5 children. And then when I began to travel the world and visit these orphanages around the world, I began to identify with these children. I had lost my children. They had lost their mother and father. And so I could identify with their pain and their suffering and their needs. And that was the connection for me. It was the divorce and the loss of my children began to prepare me for meeting these other orphans that had lost their parents. So I was able to identify with their needs, identify with how they were faced with, and I realized that there was a connection between me and them. I understood that. I understood what that pain was. And so it helped me. It helped me to understand what their needs were and I just began to educate myself on what the needs we can help them. What are the wrong ways? What are the right ways? Who do we connect with? Who do we work through? Who do we work with? Who do we partner with? And those kinds of things, it's what makes an entrepreneur successful continuously and over the long haul, is because I was willing to spend the time, certainly not 40 hours a week, certainly not 60, and probably more like 80 hours a week, either doing the paperwork that needed to be done, contacting the people that I needed to contact to see if we could find someone to help us and to donate and to partner with us, and then to educate myself on what the needs were around the world. What were other people learning about the needs of orphans? What were universities learning? What were other organisms marketing? If you're an entrepreneur and you're not marketing, you're probably not going to be growing. It doesn't mean you have to be an expert at it, but you need to at least understand it and either have a partner, have somebody who can work with you and help you, or to educate yourself and become good at marketing. And fortunately for me, I have a background in radio and television, so I do that a lot. I work in marketing through radio and television. And then we also have churches, we have schools, we have young people that want to make an impact on the world, and this is a great way to do it. And so that's a little bit more of the longer story. Varied background for me. I did not attend college. My own children, I would say, yes, go to college, get that education. Never can tell if you're going to use it or not. On the other hand, it may not be the best thing for everybody. It certainly didn't stop me from starting Food for Orphans, and didn't stop me from helping these kids out. But on the other hand, I probably had to spend more time doing the research that perhaps I could have picked up along the way if I had gone to school. But not having gone to college puts me into a different class of entrepreneur, those people that who don't have the background of education to help fill in the gap. So I have to figure it out myself. Not the best way to do it.
You talked about how when you were traveling and you came across these kids, these orphans, that really changed the way that you thought. I'm interested to learn specifically how, like, what did it change and how did it change those things?
Well, when I say it changed things, it changed my perspective, for one. I had a bit of a cynical nature. And I thought, I just didn't think about orphans, didn't think about them at all. Didn't realize that there were kids out there that were literally living in the jungle by themselves. We've got several thousand orphans that we help. Story here. There's a girl. Her name is Mary, and she lives in a one-room hut. It's got no windows. It's got a doorway cut out, and it's got a T-shirt for a door. And she wears an old T-shirt because that's all she's got. She's got two little brothers, and the three of them are living in this mud hut. They have very little to wear. They don't have any kind of support from anybody. They do whatever they have to do. What Mary has done is that she's learned that she can go into the jungle, and there's a mango tree that she can go and find mangoes that have fallen and go down to the road where the tourists drive by and try to sell these mangoes to the tourists as they drive by. And then she takes that money and goes to the store and buys a little bit of food and then takes it home and fixes it for her and her two little brothers. But Ben, the thing that breaks my heart is that Mary was 8 years old and she was taking care of her little two brothers. And when I realized that there were those kinds of children in the world that don't have help, that don't have anyone to support them, that they can say, I've got somebody who's got my back. I've got somebody who's going to protect me. I've got somebody who's going to help me get through the day-to-day pain of starvation. And that just breaks my heart to think that Mary was so willing to give of herself for her two little brothers. And she didn't have a choice. This was just life for her. Every day she does this. She has no other way to feed herself and her brothers, and there's no one to help her. Well, there was no one to help her. Now we've made sure that Mary and her brothers are taken care of. but that is the difficult thing for me because in my travels, I began to talk to those that I call the real heroes, not me, goodness gracious. I'm certainly not a hero, but what I've learned is that these people that are the orphan caregivers, the ones that will take the children into their own home, and that's what it is. There's no such thing as a professional orphanage. These are people who may have a husband and wife and a couple of kids, and their neighbors all of a sudden die for whatever reason, or the husband leaves and the mother dies. There's a lot of of the problems around the world with husbands leaving. I don't know why, and I'm ashamed to be a male, and I realize that there's a problem with men around the world leaving their families, but that's what happens. Or unfortunately, Ben, there's a lot of families that just abandon their children and walk away. And that has happened countless thousands of times. I've met so many children where that's happened, and that's an extra pain on their heart. But these are the things that these kids have to deal with. And when I realized that these kids needed help and needed someone to stand by them, I decided that that's what I would do, and I would just help them as much as I could. Uh, they don't the heroes, like I said, are the caregivers. They're the ones that said that someone has said, "Hey, the neighbors passed away and they've got 3 kids. Please take them in," and they will do that. Well, guess what? That's now you got an orphanage, uh, uh, and they don't have support from their local country, their local government. They don't have federal uh, grants that come in. Nothing. They uh, they bring these kids in and say, else dies down the street. They say, well, that couple took the other 3 in. Let's take these 3 and bring them in. That's the way it starts. Everyone I've known that have taken care of these orphans, that's the way it started. There's a couple that I love in Sierra Leone, Africa. They've got about 100 children in their home now that
Wow.
they keep putting up more rooms. They build, so they make these bricks. They put on another room in the house, and they make sure that these kids have got a place to stay, and they do whatever they have to feed them. They're not wealthy at all. They're extremely poor. But when you've got that many kids, it doesn't take much before you have to have mother and father stay at home from their job just to care for the babies and just to care for the young kids. And then, of course, in a third world, there's a charge for every test. And then if they want to graduate at the end of the year, they have to pay to graduate as well. So there's a big expense for these people who are willing to take in a stranger and say, we'll do whatever we have to, and we'll do the best we can. Uh, I think that these caregivers are real heroes. And when I'm given an opportunity to help them, I'm going to do it, because I've met some people who, like the couple in Sierra Leone, they're not a young couple. They're my age. They're in their 60s, and they're doing this. And I just love it. I love these kind of people. I think that they're extremely brave and strong, and I feel that they deserve the best. And I'm going to do whatever I can to help them.
With such a widespread problem with so many kids affected, and this phenomenon happening all over the world, how do you assess and decide who to help first? I mean, I know it's kind of a ruthless question because there's like I don't know the answer, but I'm just curious. Like, how do you decide who to help first?
Yeah, it is a ruthless question, and that I applaud you for being brave enough to ask it, because it is a painful question for me to consider, because that's something I have to consider all the time. Unfortunately, I'm not wealthy, and I don't know too many wealthy people. I don't know any wealthy people, really. People that are better off than me, but not wealthy. And so we don't have an unlimited amount of money, which means I have to decide when to stop and when to start providing food for an orphanage. We have a couple of different ways we can do that. We provide food either by sending them food directly from the U.S. or by providing them the money to buy their food locally in their village. Now, when we send food from the U.S., then it's expensive. Shipping is very expensive. And when we send them the money, it helps the local economy. So that's the best way to do it. So when we find out that there's an orphanage that needs help, and goodness, Ben, there's 165 million orphans around the world, and those are just the ones that they've been able to count.
Right.
There's probably going to be another 100 million who live on the street. So there's a lot of orphans that need help. And when we learn of an orphanage that needs help, I do have to make some rather cold decisions. I want to help them, but if we don't have the funds to do it, then there's no sense in me writing a bad check. And I'm not going to do that. We have already cut our expenses to the bone. We're doing the best we can. We're trying marketing and trying to let people know what we do. We're trying to spread the word that there are children who need help, and there is a way to help them. And we will make sure that these kids receive the food that they need if the donors will help us out. And when we are faced with the vision of whether or not we help somebody, if the money's not there, we can't help them. But even if we had the money, we still have to make the decision of, are these people trustworthy? Is this a real orphanage or is this fake? I've heard stories about people that when they heard the Americans were coming in, or they heard that the Australians or whoever was, bringing this program into their community and saying we want to help orphans. But when they heard the money was coming in, they would go out and hire kids to live in an empty house and pretend that it was an orphanage. And then they get the money and they spend it.
Wow.
And then they get money every month from these people. And unfortunately, it's not legit. Cheating, are they skimming off the top? Are they taking care of themselves first? Are they being honest? Are they, if we send them money, are they going to use it for exactly what we are expect them to use it for? And so that means I have to do a lot of travel. I have to go to the projects, and I have to visit them, and I have to interview them, and I have to interview their neighbors. I have to interview people in the community and find out whether or not this is a legit organization, a legit project, and whether or not it is worthy of the donors to support. It's very difficult to do that. I wish I could say that I've never been fooled a couple of times, but we shut those projects, their funding down immediately. Yeah, that's the reason why it's not a good idea for people who have a generous heart to try to connect with people overseas who contact them and say, look, I'm trying to take care of these 50 children and I need help. You know, people have a soft heart. They want to help. There's no doubt people want to help. But if they don't have the capacity to check and verify, then they may be wasting their money. And so that's the reason why we ask people if possible. And if you want to go visit the projects, we'll take you there and we'll go see them together. But it's not a good idea to try to find this stuff out by yourself. Let people who are experts at it, who have experience, let them do it. And that's part of what I had to do in the beginning of starting Food for Orphans, was not only have a nice idea to help orphans, but then to figure out how to do it. How do I get people to partner with us? How do I get people to donate? How do I find the projects that truly deserve help and that will use the funding wisely and honestly? And that takes a lot of experience. And luckily, one of the ways that I do it is I work through other organizations and people that are missionaries who live in the community there and keep their eye on what's going on in that project. But when I work through other organizations, it'll be organizations that take care of children around the world. And that means that they have a vested interest in the honesty and integrity of this project because they're also supporting it. Their donors are also supporting it. They have to answer to their donors as to whether or not they have verified everything that goes on there and whether the money that the donors donate so that first off, we don't have to spend as much money verifying all this. They're going to spend their money verifying it. That's fine with me. They've got more money than I do. But I want to make sure that we partner with people and organizations that really are going to give us the information that we need to help these kids out. And it's worked out really well so far. And we kind of fluctuate on the number of countries we're in, the number of projects we support, because it's all based upon the funding that comes into us. I mean, we're just a pipeline. That's all we are. We're a pipeline where the money comes in one side, goes out the other. And all I do is make sure that money is going to the right place, to the right people who will do it the right way. And at the end of the day, can I sleep well at night knowing that I've done something good for the children? I can sleep good. And if I've been foolish, then I don't sleep very well. But I sleep pretty good because I've really invested a lot of years in making sure that this is done the right way.
All of
So
the
that you feel good.
oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. You kind of froze for a second.
Yeah, lovely internet.
Well, this is the fun of a live broadcast. So in all the years that you've been building your organization and you've been working so closely with this cause, with all the people associated with it, what are some of the biggest lessons that you've learned on your journey?
Help me answer your question. Give me a subject. In what area would you like that answer to be? Would you like it to be in administration? Would you like to be in just relationship?
Yeah, let's
or,
start there. Let's start there.
what with all of it?
Well, all of it, but let's start with relationships.
Well, yeah. Well, first off, I had to learn how to talk to people, how to ask the right questions, how to know what questions you want to ask. What am I looking for? What answers am I looking for? Uh, that's the necessary thing. If it's like people that I've talked to, they have an entrepreneurial attitude, but they've picked their own business because they didn't do their research to find out that there's a market for what they want to do, that there are customers already out there, either waiting or spending money with somebody else. And if you can't, let's see, if I don't want to say you can't do this, but I'm thinking about somebody who wants to start a company or a business. And it seems to me that I would want to make sure that there are people out there that would be buying my services or my products. I would want to make sure that there is a way to find people of interest who have an interest. And I've met so many people that have started companies that I think to myself, what made you think that there would be anybody interested in spending their money with you on this subject? And I guess it's because people do have a tendency to pursue those areas that they have an interest in themselves. Very few people will, especially new entrepreneurs, will first research what is needed out there in the marketplace and how can I fill that need. That's a great way to start a business, but not many people do it that way. They usually go after their hobby or the things they have an interest in, and that's great if there's a way to convert that into an income, into building the business. But when we talk about relationships and things like that, then one of the things that with a nonprofit is that I don't have a product to sell. I'm asking people to reach in their pocket, take out their credit card, and give $33 a month to feed 3 orphans, or $55 a month to feed 5 orphans, or $99 a month to feed 9 orphans. And they don't get anything in return. And so I had to figure that these children need help. And even though you've worked hard for your money, I'm asking you to take part of it and give it away to someone else. And that's difficult to do. Is because people have a heart for suffering children. Now, I've met a lot of people who don't care one bit about suffering children. And those are people that you just say, okay, that is someone who doesn't have an interest in what I do. Now move on. But then you all of a sudden find someone that does have an interest. And I've met so many of those people. And I know that there are more out there if they just knew who we were and what we did and the fact that these children need help. Ben, one of the things that has shocked me are the statistics. We mentioned 160 million orphans around the world. 100 million more are uncounted because they live on the street. But then the numbers get even deeper. 60 million orphans, we estimate, will go to bed hungry every single night. 60 million don't know when their next meal is coming. They go to bed hungry. The pain of starvation has already started, and it doesn't take long for starvation to take the life of an orphan. As a matter of fact, every 90 seconds, another orphan starves to death. Now, that doesn't mean that he got sick or got hit by a car or or got in a fight and died. It means, and the psychological damage and impact that is, these poor kids, they they're 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 dying every 90 seconds. Another orphan dies because they've starved to death. And the statistic that really rocked me was that every 2 seconds, another child loses its mother or father and becomes an orphan. Every 2 seconds. And do we have to take care of these kids? Run away and leave their children standing on the street corner and say, take care of yourself, I'm out of here. That shouldn't happen, but it does. Is it our responsibility? Absolutely not. It is no one's responsibility to take care of these kids unless you believe in a higher power, unless you believe that there is a God who holds us responsible for our brothers, unless you believe that there is a reason why we weren't born that way. We weren't born having to take care of our two little brothers in the jungle. Those are the reasons why I believe that we need to do something. And the relationships that we build in finding people to help have been tremendous. I've met so many people. I met some donors last weekend that have been helping us feed orphans for the last 10 years. And this weekend was the first time I've ever met them. And it was terrific. And their attitude and the reasons why they are partners with us and the reason why they support our work, it goes right to the heart. And that's one of the things that I've learned is that not everybody wants to partner with us. Not everybody wants to help orphans. But when you find people that do, I have a responsibility to provide them a vehicle that will accomplish the goals that they have. They want to make sure that these orphans are fed. Well, what am I doing about that? Am I providing the right vehicle? Am I providing the right source of nutrition? Am I providing the help that will really be good for them? And if I can do that, then these folks will partner with us and we'll build strong relationships that will go on many, many years. We really ask people to make a monthly commitment because these kids need to eat every month. I'm sorry, they need to eat every day. And so we have to build those relationships where we can continue to report on what goes on. We can and tell them what their donations have accomplished. And in other words, communication. It goes way beyond just a report. It means that I have to find out what's going on and then translate that into a communication device so that people can read it, hear it, see it, and know what's going on with their donation. And then it shows them that they've chosen a good organization. Communication and my responsibilities as the leader of this organization to communicate with the people that are either donating to us or might donate to us. Because there's a lot of people, but they're not donors. They might be future donors, but they're just watching what we do and reading about it, finding out about it, And eventually, maybe they will. So, okay, what to communicate and be willing to do that. And it's not that I get along with everybody, but you learn how to have these relationships and how to make them work.
Well, Gary, I want to thank you.
And when I learn things like,
Oh, please go on. The connection is a little bit of a lag.
isn't that terrible? Yeah, I'm sorry that it's like that. And we'll have to do the best we can, okay? But I'm sorry, I'm on some medicine right now. And medicine makes me dry. That's one of the things that I wanted to talk to you about because of the subject matter that you have with your audience. Starting a business, running a business, and being responsible for the business. That's what an entrepreneur is. It's not somebody who becomes Steve Jobs. It's somebody who just says, yeah, the buck stops here. You know, I write the checks. I have to pay the bills. I have to risk it all. And you know, those are the things that make it difficult. When I first started Food for Orphans in 2007, everything was hunky dory. Everything was fine. 3 months after I started Food for Orphans, my wife found out she had breast cancer. So now here I am in the mesh of trying to incorporate and file for a nonprofit status with the government so that our people's donations would be non-taxable. And my wife is in the fight for her life. She had surgery, radiation treatments, chemotherapy. And when they did the surgery, they found that their cancer had begun to spread. I am thrilled and pleased to say that my wife is cancer-free today. But that didn't mean, I mean, that we still had the fight. And it happened right after I started Food for Orphans, while I was still trying to put it all together, while I was still trying to learn what to do. Well, about 4 months after that, my doctor pulled me aside and he said, I have some bad news for you. You have cancer. And here, my wife and I were fighting cancer at the same time. And I didn't give up. It doesn't make me a hero. It doesn't make me strong. I was just bullheaded. Fortunately, I didn't have to go through the chemotherapy and I didn't have to go through radiation. But I still had some extensive surgery and some very life-changing surgery. And I'm happy to say I'm cancer-free today. But 6 months after I had that surgery, I had went to my dermatologist because I had been told by my surgeon to get everything checked out. And he says, everything's fine. He says, except that one dot on your arm. And he said, we're going to do a biopsy and check that out. And he came back and said, well, you've got skin cancer. And unfortunately, it's melanoma, which is the real serious, deadly form of skin cancer. I had surgery. They took out about 8 inches of my left arm, all the way down to the bone. And I've got a gnarly scar right there now. Looks like I've been in a knife fight. But I'm pleased to say I don't have cancer anymore. But it was a challenge, Ben, to try to keep our life together. And even though my wife had finished her chemotherapy by then and her radiation, and everything else, there was still that gnawing question about, is it, how far did it spread in her? And is it going to resurface again later? And they found that my cancers, both of them, had begun to spread. And so that was always the nagging thing that almost caused us to stop building food for orphans. But we didn't do it. We didn't stop. We kept going at it. We kept working at it. And I guess that may be one of the definitions of an entrepreneur, is someone who's willing to keep working when it hurts, willing to keep working when the 8 hours are over, willing to get up in the middle of the night because you've got an idea and you've got to go write it down. You've got to work on it. You've got to do research it. Those are the things that I learned. And it's that you don't always think of yourself. And fortunately for me, I wasn't thinking about building a business to better my family, or to do something that would benefit me directly. I wanted to help these children. I wanted to help the orphans that needed help. And so that made it a little easier for me to concentrate on the need that was out there, and at the same time take care of myself. But I didn't feel the need to give up or postpone it or to delay it. I kept at it. My wife, she was amazing. She would have chemotherapy and then come home, pack her suitcase, and head off to Africa for two weeks, and then head off to India for 2 weeks. She's a bulldog. She's rough and tough. I mean, she really didn't let any of this stuff stop her or slow her down. And I guess that was my motivation, was to watch her and to realize that I got to suck it up and put my big boy pants on and fight that battle that I was fighting too. And I realized that you can do that. You can fight through the pain. You can fight through the challenges. If you're climbing a mountain, which is what this is, starting an organization, starting a business, if you're climbing a mountain, if you can only do it one small step at a time, you'll eventually go to the top of the mountain. It just takes a while. It's slow. It's not very encouraging, but you can make it. And if somebody is just willing to continue to take that one step after the other, do what it takes, live through the pain, live through the challenges, don't let it get you down. And if you've made a mistake, you don't have to start over. Just redirect yourself, change your course, look at something different. And that's one of the things that I learned by watching my wife, is that she also works for a nonprofit, and she didn't quit, and I wasn't going to either. But it was a challenge. And since then, like I said, I'm cancer free, but 5 years ago, I was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease. So this is ongoing with me, and it's continuous, and I'll have it the rest of my life. It won't kill me. It might slow me down a bit, but I'm 68 now, and I think that I'm going to be around for a long time. And I think there's, we said 8 million meals so far. I think that's just the beginning, Ben.
Well, Gary, you have an incredible story, and I feel very honored to have been able to hear it today and to be able to have shared this time with you. It was very special. So thank you very much for coming on the show.
Well, thank you, Ben. And I would like to end with how people can join me in helping feed these orphans. Our website is foodfororphans.org. That's food, FOR, for orphans.org. And we do have a toll-free telephone number. An operator is standing by to take a donation. It's 888-242-0069. It's 888-242-0069. And we'd love to have folks to join us in helping to feed these orphans.
Fantastic. Well, thank you again so much, Gary, for your time. And to everybody who's watching and listening, I want to thank y'all very much as well. Your time is very valuable. So I'm very grateful that you choose to share some of it with us today. So thank y'all. I love y'all very, very much. And I will see you on the next episode. Take care.